This is Nate Richardson. I'm going to point out a couple issues with the idea that religion should not concern itself with evolution. In particular, a 1931 statement claiming that the Latter-day Saints should leave it all to the scientists. So this is talked about in the Let's Talk About Science and Religion book, which promotes evolution and is sold at Deseret Book. Kind of the antithesis to Joseph Fielding Smith's Man, His Origin and Destiny, 70 years after the fact. So on page 50, they talk about how Heber J. Grant says that church leaders should leave science alone since it doesn't have anything to do with our salvation. Here's the quote. Leave geology, biology, archaeology, anthropology, no one of which has to do with the salvation of souls of mankind, to scientific research while we magnify our calling in the realm of the church upon one thing we should all be able to agree, namely that Presidents Joseph F. Smith, John R. Winder, and Anthony H. Lund were right when they said, quote, Adam is the primal parent of our race, close quote, and that's the close of the whole quote. Now, the important thing about this, leave it to the scientists statement, well, there's two things mainly. One is that the source of the quote is that it wasn't presented to the church for acceptance. Like, this was not a first present statement put out to the church members similar as the 1909 was. They cite the 1909 when they say, we agree with Joseph F. Smith, Winder, and Lund that Adam is the primal parent of our race. Okay? So we have to keep that footing. We have to maintain that doctrine and the implications of that doctrine. You know, when you profess to be a Christian, it's not enough to just walk around with a badge on your chest that says Jesus. You have to actually do what Jesus said. You have to actually believe what Jesus said. And it's similar with this, our profession that Adam is the primal parent of our race. Doesn't it come to mind that not all who say, Lord, Lord, will enter into my kingdom? In other words, if we're going to claim that Adam is the primal parent of our race, shouldn't we take a clue about what the implications of that are? Because if Adam was the first man, okay, it's an extrapolation, it's a twisting of logic to say, oh, there was monkey man before man, and that man's dad was monkey man, right? That's what evolution says, is that humans came from monkeys, that for a long time, eventually the monkeys became what we are right now, from little changes over a long time. So, long story short, the parent of man is the monkey man, not what the scriptures and the prophets have said, that man is the offspring of God. Luke 3:38, this Adam was the son of God. And we've got the 1909 First Presidency Statement in the 1925 that say we're the direct lineal offspring of God. Lineal means you can make a line up, trace your ancestors, and when you get high enough in that line, you're going to reach God. So in other words, what happened before Adam? Was it monkey man or was it God? Okay? Whoever Adam's dad is, that's God. So do you worship the monkey man or do you worship the God? Do you worship, maybe the monkey man came from the sponge ultimately, so do we worship the sponge? Or do we worship God? Do we worship SpongeBob SquarePants? Who's your daddy? Dr. Kent Hovind has a hilarious little joke on this, and he'll pull it all the time on these atheists. He says, I guess your daddy is the sponge. Or the prebiotic soup, the Campbell's soup, right? Is that your grandpa? So, in all seriousness, let's continue on our discussion of this quote in 1931. This is cited as First Presidency Minutes, and others cite it as First Presidency Memorandum to General Authorities. Notice the source for this quote indicates that it was never presented to the members of the church as official church doctrine. The saints are not to be expected to accept a private discussion, even a First Presidency discussion, as the church's position on something. Although some parts of the 1931 memo have been published privately, neither the memo nor any excerpt from it has yet been published by the church. The situation that brought about this quote in the first place was B.H. Roberts' theory that there may have been people on earth before the fall of Adam. The 1930, which of course the brethren did not like, because it's against everything we stand for. The 1931 controversy and resulting private statement of Grant was not from an argument about whether organic evolution was on the table at all. Organic evolution was never a viable option. As in, human evolution as in plants and animals and people all having a common living ancestor, as in all people and all animals came from the same thing. Okay, that's the heart of evolution, is that by natural selections, one common ancestor turned into all animals and humans. Okay, this was not something that was ever considered as a possibility by the prophets. And there's explicit revelations to the contrary, stating that we cannot accept evolution and its implications. Next, let's ask, how does this square with the official First Presidency Statement Grant released, which echoed the 1909 official church position and quoted from it, that mankind did not evolve from lower species, but that instead we were the literal, quote, literal offspring of deity, close quote. Okay, and remember these statements, they say, there are some who suggest that we came from the lower orders of creation, but these are the theories of men. Total rejection of that. I read the statement elsewhere. Go look up the 1909 statement. Please become familiar with that. Maybe I'll read it later in this little video too. Clearly, this 1909 statement is at odds with the evolutionary teaching that man evolved from lower life forms through natural selection and survival of the fittest. The 1931 statement must be understood in that context, that this sentiment of science not applying to the welfare of our souls does not apply to them, does not apply when it comes to evolution, as we cited above in Joseph F. Smith's teaching, because evolution does pertain to the origins of man. It's an inherently religious subject. Can we ignore the moral, theological implications clearly present in evolutionary teaching? Remember, evolution was made as a theory to explain nature without God. And guess what? Jacob teaches in the Book of Mormon that you can't understand the creation. I think it was Jacob 4. You can't understand the creation without revelation. You can't understand the creation without God. God is the obvious thing going on. And God isn't just some cloud. The Restoration says that it's much more than that. God is actually a person. He's an exalted man. Okay? God isn't setting up a clock and watching it tick. These are popular theistic ideas that are not Restoration ideas. And they're not biblical ideas either. The Bible and the Restoration, all of that shows God highly involved. And it shows God making various life forms, not just one little thing that turns into everything else. Okay, so this idea that evolution doesn't have anything to do with our salvation. Okay, we're not even beginning to get into all the social implications of how some races are more evolved than others, and we're justified in flexing our strength, and the teachings of Alfred Kinsey and the teachings of Mr. Money and the teachings of obviously Hitler and other Mao and other people who adopted Darwinian evolution as an excuse for all their heinous crimes and murders. Basically, evolution is what was the theological backdrop to the World War II. Okay? The eugenics movement was in America, and then it went in Germany, and there's a lot of problems going on with what. So if we want to say, oh, well, evolution doesn't have to do with it. Some scientific theories have a lot to do with social problems and religious problems and religious doctrines. Okay? For example, if we were to say, oh, well, the science of abortion, right? Something like that. Well, now, are we going to justify abortions? Are we going to justify eugenics? Are we going to assisted suicide, the elderly and the crippled? Are we going to forcefully euthanize and sterilize people who are irresponsible? Or, where does it stop? You can't just make that big disconnect that science and religion are mutually exclusive. In the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord says, I don't make any separation between temporal and spiritual things. And he says, a big point of religion is we want to bring all things into one great whole. So it's hard to understand this in our secular modern world because we do separate religion and science very... You go to the schools and the colleges and there's zero religion. There's, and a lot of the time religion is just a Sunday thing, maybe I'll crack open my Bible every blue moon or show up at church, but Other than that, I mean, I'm supposed to like not physically harm people, but other than that, what am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to believe in? Where's the hope going to be if we don't have any understanding of our origins, any understanding of why the atonement was necessary? Because let me tell you, the fall of Adam is annihilated in evolution theory. You can't have the fall of Adam in evolution theory. Evolution says you have the rise of Adam. It says these animals rose up and up and up until you got Adam. And why do you need the atonement either? Because we're just going to keep evolving. Why do we need, Jesus to come and reverse the fall when, So there's a lot of problems there. The creation, the fall, and the atonement are all blasted. These three pillars of the gospel are all blasted. Elder McConkie said, the creation, fall, and atonement are the three pillars of our religion, right? Of the gospel of Christ. And Elder McConkie, if you know anything about him, he was very clear in his teachings that Darwinian evolution were abominable. And of course, when he taught this, he wasn't just coming up with something of his own. He was echoing the teachings, the inspired teachings of the prophets and the scriptures. So let's dial back in now. Okay. All things pertain to the souls of mankind, especially those theories of men which have so much to do with the eternal soul and the origins of man. When we see the massive wave of faith crisis evolution is causing, can we persist in claiming that science is an abstract moral study, amoral study? So evolution really does crush people's faith. I mean, it's one of the main reasons that kids going to college will stop being religious when they leave home. And the Christian evolutionists, including our friends at the BYU, seem to think that we can put a Band-Aid on this problem by saying, oh, God used evolution. But that just isn't logical. It isn't coherent. It doesn't align with the restoration message or the Bible message. There's so many problems. No death before the fall. How do you have that? If there's evolution of species for thousands and millions of years, what do you mean no death before the fall? Of course there's death before the fall. But the scriptures are full of no death before the fall, the Bible and the Book of Mormon. And the Book of Mormon's purpose is to come in and say, well, I guess you guys aren't really taking the Bible the way that I intended it, so let's just make sure we get things straight with the Book of Mormon. And if we still can't get figured out at that point, I think it's kind of game over. So here's a little joke for you. This gentleman is by this tornado. It says the tornado is multiple first presidency statements against evolution. And the angry guy says, no official position. Right? You'll hear that all the time. There's no official position. Oh, the 2016 New Era magazine said there's no official position on evolution. Well, tell me who authored that. It's anonymous. It's not a first presidency statement. You can't reject signed first presidency statements in favor of these nameless articles showing up in our magazines sometimes. Are you aware that multiple prophets have said, Ezra Taft Benson and others, that not everything that shows up in a church publication is going to square with the truth? We'll get into some of those quotes later, but the wheat's growing up with the tares. Okay? We sustain the leadership of the church, but we recognize that, did you know that not every single church publication is scanned with a fine-tooth comb by the prophet himself? That's not how the process works. My wife was, she knew the people that do the church magazines and how that process works, and the student interns who write all the stuff. And it's a fact that not everything in those publications are from the church. Another one is the 1910 statement. There's a statement that they attribute to Joseph F. Smith and the first presidency that appears in a Improvement Era magazine, saying that evolution is one of the several possibilities of how the humans showed up on this earth. But again, that 1910 statement is just another one of these things that shows up in a magazine, and it's not signed by the Joseph F. Smith. It's not signed by the first presidency. When the first presidency wants to say something, when they want to declare a doctrine of the church, their names will be on it, man. And their names are not on it in this 2016 thing, in this 1910 thing, and even in this thing that we're talking about right now, with the, what year is this one? Where did I put it? Come on. The 1931 of leaving it all to scientists. Again, this is not church doctrine. This is some little meeting notes, okay? This is not for the church. Now, what is for the church? The origin of man statement, that those who claim that we came from lower orders, this is the theories of men, and it's to be rejected. The church has been so clear on this, and President Packer, when he heard people, Boyd K. Packer, he heard people saying that there's no official position, he would point to the 1909 and the 1925. He said, no, we've come out twice and said this. Why can't you guys figure this out? So let's do a couple more thoughts here before we wrap up. On a certain level, we can indeed leave science to scientists, but whatever happened to bringing all truth into one great whole? We are commanded in Scripture to bring all things together in one in Christ. Are we scaling back to only the few topics the secular world will allow us to know God's will about? Whatever happened to all truth belonging to Mormonism, as in to the Restoration, as Joseph Brigham and their successors taught? Can we teach our doctrine and mainstream science, which directly contradicts it at the same time? Indeed, we must use the facts of religion to reject the pseudoscientific theories of men. The problem is these evolutionists put their science as what they know and their religion as what they believe. Okay? Now, God actually wants us to know the truth of all things. And He wants us to get revelation, undeniable revelation. Can you get the revelation that the 1909 statement is inspired and true? Yes, you can. And even in the Let's Talk About Science and Religion book, one of the things they say is, well, we have this culture where we think we have to know the truth of all things, and we should be okay with doubt and not knowing. It's like, okay, but are we also okay with knowing stuff? Because we should be okay with that too. We should be okay with saying, all right, the prophets have taught this for 100 years. The scriptures are full of it. I'm good with this. This is just one of the facts of my faith. So it's backwards when we take science as what we know and religion as what we believe. That's very scary stuff. How often does science get it wrong? Pretty often. And you're not aware of this if you go to BYU, but there's actually, because when I was at BYU, I never heard a lick of it. There's actually a lot of reputable scientists who don't buy into evolution. Why don't we bring in Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe and Jonathan Wells and some of these highly credentialed and smart scientists who can tell you a whole bunch of problems with evolution? Why don't we have them guest lecture at BYU? Why don't we have a creation science class at BYU that, let's offer an alternative to evolution. Let's show both sides. That's the problem that's going on right now. In this, at BYU, you only hear one side. And in the Deseret book, you're only seeing one side. They're not selling Man, His Origin, and Destiny by Joseph Fielding Smith anymore. You can get the ebook, but you can't get it in print. Well, that might be a good thing that they're not selling it, because if Man, His Origin, and Destiny ever touches Let's Talk About Science and Religion, probably an explosion would occur. So these books are the opposite, complete opposite message being advocated. Joseph Fielding Smith was true to the Restoration. He was a prophet. And I'm sorry, but these secular evolutionist voices are not inspired. Okay? You won't find in the Let's Talk About Science and Religion, did you know there's at least five quotes from President Nelson where he denounced evolution? This book was published while President Nelson was the prophet. And the only thing that they brought up about President Nelson in their book was that he attended the dedication of the Life Science building at BYU, and he said, this will be a great place to study stuff. That's it. I think it was misleading. If you don't say anything else that he taught about this, that Earth was a paradise planet before the fall of Adam, a paradise planet, the whole planet was a paradise. It wasn't natural selection, survival of the fittest, dog eat dog, I'm stronger than you and you're going to die. That wasn't what's going on before the fall. And he taught that dogs have always been dogs, monkeys have always been monkeys, that's just the way genetic works. Okay, there's known limits to species change. They can't go past certain limits. For example, you breed a horse and a donkey and you get a mule. That mule is infertile. There's limits to how much species can change. It's not going to continue on. These basic facts of science and these basic facts of religion are all just flushed down the toilet when we're playing with evolution. So at BYU, it's all one-sided. The Let's Talk About Science and Religion book that's being promoted is all one-sided. And yes, it's being promoted in the church magazines. And yes, Deseret book is owned by the church. So it's a sad thing that's going on right now that we've done such a 180 on evolution lately. When I was, I've talked to people who, they don't even know that BYU is pushing evolution. And back in their generation, it was talked about, we explained to you what it was, but we didn't advocate it. But now we're advocating. And we corresponded with President Oakes, and we said, why is BYU advocating evolution? And he said, well, at BYU we want to expose people to various ideas, but we don't want to advocate the theories of men. So this, unfortunately, is not really what's happening. It is being advocated, and they're keeping statistics on how many students they can turn over to evolution. And in my Biology 101 class, they talk about, oh yeah, all animals and humans came from a single common ancestor. Just a matter of fact, my astronomy professor, she tried to get me into evolution. Like, it's everywhere. And the chemistry professors, they would joke about, oh yeah, the religionists, get it wrong all the time. And it's pretty sad how we're sort of trampling underfoot. We're trampling God underfoot when we are taking this approach. So let's get a little more well-rounded, and let's not be so scared of being different. It's okay to not fit in all the way. There's other Christians who do it. We don't have to be in the mainstream all the time. Yeah, we used to be persecuted a lot, and we're kind of tired of that as Latter-day Saints. We're tired of being persecuted. But it's okay. We can be persecuted some more. We don't have to be in the mainstream. Our schools don't have to be accredited if that's what it costs. Elder Holland talked about this in his musket fire speech. He's like, look, at some point, we have to break with the mainstream and all their fancy, stamps of approval if they're not cooperating with the revealed principles of God. All right? If science hadn't become so corrupted, we wouldn't be so worried about it. But the devil has corrupted the science establishment. Think about it. Why wouldn't he? It's a great way to get people onto his side. Tax dollars, endless tax dollars, kids in school all day. Man, if he didn't manipulate science, he'd be a total idiot. Science is a great way for him to go. It's a great way for him to get people on his side. We must trust the science, after all. But no, we cannot let lies in the textbooks and lectures go unchallenged. It is because of our testimonies of the truth that we can easily detect the errors of these popular theories. Latter-day Saints, let me just say, remember the Hoffman forgeries? That guy who blew stuff up, and he claimed that there was all this crazy salamander stuff. And yeah, well, the intellectuals bought it for a long time, but guess who didn't buy it? Bruce R. McConkie didn't buy it because he knew Joseph Smith's teachings. He knew that what Hoffman was putting out wasn't authentic because it didn't match the spirit and message of Joseph Smith. Well, guess what? If we are well versed in the teachings of the prophets, we can discern that this evolution theory is not in step with the Lord's revelations about how he created the earth and how he created life. Okay? Latter-day Saints not only accept truth wherever it is found, but they also fight against falsehood wherever it is found. You can't preach truth without simultaneously rebuking falsehood. And I'm sorry, but we have to get a little controversial sometimes. It would be nice if everyone played fair and if everyone was honest and we all, listened to the prophets and took them at their word. And we, we're all spiritual giants. But not everyone's playing fair and not everyone's showing both sides. And you have to get tough a little bit sometimes. And, the mama bear, she doesn't just sit around and let her cubs get eaten. she actually gets in on the fight. So hopefully we can be a little more courageous on some of these things. And in closing, President Benson taught the book, quote, "The Book of Mormon exposes the enemies of Christ and confounds false doctrines," close quote. Teachings of the President of the Church, 132. So the Book of Mormon, it does have several passages against evolution. It says there's no death before the fall, 2 Nephi 2:22, and that all things that were created would have remained in the same state they were created in, and had no end. And all things, that again, that's where President Nelson got the teaching that it was a paradise planet before the fall. It was all things. It wasn't just, oh, Eden was this little sanctuary and all around it was Armageddon. No, it was a paradise planet. And before the fall, it was also probably in a different location, in the presence of God. And there's teachings on that too. Let me see if I can find the first presidency statement. I'll just read it in closing, the 1909. Okay, I've got it here. So in 1909, the origin of man, quote, "It is held by some that Adam was not the first man upon this earth, and that the original human being was a development from lower orders of the animal creation. However, these however are the theories of men. The word of the Lord declares that Adam was the first man of all men," Moses 134, "and we are therefore in duty bound to regard him as the primal parent of our race. It was shown to the brother of Jared that all men were created in the beginning after the image of God, and whether we take this to mean spirit or the body or both, it commits to us the same conclusion. Man began life as a human being in the likeness of our Heavenly Father," close quote. Now, you can't get much more plain than that, folks. The first man was not from development of lower orders of animal creation. That's exactly what evolution claims. That how did humans get here? Well, from the lower orders of animals. Okay? If you are a Latter-day Saint, you should understand this, right? That we reject this idea. And if you want to toy around with the idea of, oh, Adam was placed here, when the animals had evolved enough, then Adam was placed here. What? Why? God didn't use evolution. That's not how it works at all. Okay? There's this pretty picture painted for us about the transition from 4 legs to 2 legs and all this stuff. Scientists are admitting that that's not how it goes. They're having to shut down on that front. The theory of evolution is in danger. It is not surviving with the fittest. It is not, it's not going to stick around for much longer. They're saying, we have these pictures of going 4 legs to 2 legs and all this, and it's this gradual ascent thing. It's a messy picture. It's full of dead ends and diversity. This is not how it works. I'll talk about a bunch of quotes on all that stuff later. Okay, so the first presidency statement, it says, who's the first man? And if you want to twist that and say, oh, well, yeah, before him was Monkey Man. So now you're saying Monkey Man was dad of Adam? Because let's look at what else we've got here. The other one that I was going to read, another portion of the 1909 says, okay, it was also repeated in the 1925. Again, the 1925 statement repeated some of the 1909. Quote, "All men and women are in the similitude of the universal Father and Mother and are literally sons and daughters of deity. Man is the child of God, formed in the divine image and endowed with divine attributes, even as the infant son of an earthly father." Okay? "And mother is capable in due time of becoming a man, so that undeveloped offspring of the celestial parentage is capable by experience through ages and eons of evolving into a God." Close quote. So the big point there is literal sons and daughters. What does that mean? Well, we saw in the first vision that God is actually an exalted man. So if God literally has children, what does that look like? Okay? And if you give a genealogy and you can trace it, a lineal genealogy, okay? Let's look at this next part that wasn't quoted in the Let's Talk Science and Religion book, because it says we're the direct lineal offspring. It says, quote, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, basing its belief on divine revelation, ancient and modern, proclaims man to be direct and lineal offspring of deity. By his almighty power, God organized the earth and all that it contains, the spirit and element, which coexist eternally with himself," close quote. So there we see that we are the direct lineal offspring. So if you want to trace your genealogy and make a line upwards, eventually you're going to hit God. You're going to get to Adam, and then you're going to get to God. So that's what that means, direct lineal offspring. Okay? Offspring means We come from the bowels of God. Okay? And Brigham Young taught this clearly, that the same way that we make children is the same way that God makes children. And when it says man was made from the dust of the earth in Genesis, well, it says in the book of Moses, have you read the Pearl of Great Price? It says in the book, I think it was Moses, that we are also made out of the dust of the ground. So this whole dust of the ground thing is a metaphor for, Brigham Young said, we're not just going to tell little kids exactly how reproduction happens. It's like you don't just tell little kids how calculus happens, right? There's levels of knowledge that you need to progress through. So it's obvious that, and Brigham Young teaches this as well, that that's how people are made. That's just how it works. And that's how Adam and Eve were made, and that's how it works forever. God brought animals here. He brought people here. Okay? You might say that the Ark of Noah was an example of how that kind of happened. A person loads up a boat with animals and people and goes to the new world, so to speak, new place, and begins life there. We talk about our universal parent, Adam. Well, Noah's also a universal parent. Okay? So, that's about that. And if you didn't know, Elder McConkie and Elder Packer both pushed back when people would say no official position. Elder Packer said, look, we've been told twice what the official position is, 1909 and 25. Why do you keep asking? And then Elder McConkie said, should we accept the famous document of the first presidency issued in the days of President Joseph F. Smith and entitled Origin of Man as meaning exactly what it says? Indeed, we should. Look at his 7 Deadly Heresies talk on that. It means exactly what it says. Plain and precious. Okay? All right, so we'll discuss more about this. This has been a discussion about the 1931 statement where it's claimed that we should leave it all to the scientists. But when you dig a little deeper than that, often you have to dig a little deeper, okay, than the face value of something. Okay, so this was not a statement presented to or meant for the general body of the church, and it is not in complete keeping with what was officially presented to the body of the church. Okay, let's base our theology on the official proclamations. Let's not base our theology on the hearsay and the stuff that's not meant to be an official proclamation. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to richardsonstudies.com. That's where I've got a free book responding to 80 plus claims from the Let's Talk About Science and Religion evolutionist book that are simply not worth their salt. So please, let's get a little better understanding on what's at stake here and what's going on, and let's give a little bit of opposition to the currently predominant feeling among many secular voices in the church that God used evolution. That's not been the teaching of the church, and it doesn't make sense scientifically or theologically.